You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho and what is going on with the universe. I said in the last Jewel review, I saw like a new film every night of the week. And almost all of them I thought were much better than they're being credited for when I normally go the other way. Edgar Wright is someone that I absolutely detest as a filmmaker. He is analogous to Guy Ritchie for me, and the irony here is that I have trashed Guy. I thought that Guy Ritchie made a couple of really likeable films in Lock, Stock and Snatch and revealed his true colours as an atrocious director beyond merit. King Arthur was my worst film of the year it came out, and The Gentleman was suddenly a new filmmaker. So Edgar Wright, I thought exactly the same. Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz had a lot of really cool people in, and they were really likeable films, but everything he's done since then I've hated. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, I couldn't stand. The World's End is the worst thing that Simon Pegg's ever been in. And Baby Driver, which got acclaim, I thought was torturous sub-Guy Ritchie trash. And yet here I am, stunned by Last Night in Soho in far more a manner than I was with Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman, which was an excellent film. This is a delicious concept, which is a celebration of 1960s glamorous Carnaby Street, Rainy Street London, when it was the epicenter of the universe, and everyone was cool and beautiful and wearing cool clothes, and the music was amazing, and a horror movie and a sociological drama. It stars Thomasin McKenzie, and she plays a dual role with Anna Taylor-Joy. Anna Taylor-Joy was the lead of The Witch, bizarrely playing a character, which was one of my films of the decade, bizarrely playing a character called Thomasin. And her semi-doppelganger here is Thomasin McKenzie, who I recognised, but I couldn't peg where from. But she's from Leave No Trace, which was a really good film, but overrated, a follow-up to Winter's Bone, a masterpiece. She was a lead in that as a very, I guess, young teenager on the run with her dad. Here she stars as a Cornish girl whose mum has committed suicide. Her mum went to live in London and become a fashion designer from Redruth in Cornwall, this small country town. Couldn't handle the stress and the alienation and the loneliness, and took her own life. Now the Thomasin character is doing exactly the same thing. She lives with her nan. Her nan's terrified, understandably, that she is going down the same path. She sees visions of her mum in the mirror. She turns around and her mum's there, and she's obviously, she's not, it's not like she's a troubled kid. It's just she's a very margin person. She's on the margins. And obviously coming from this tiny Cornish country village to basically Soho and Carnaby Street and, the parts of London where all the cognoscenti, if that's how you say it, all of the top fashion people in the world are existing. She's a little bit bullied as soon as she gets there. So she stays in these horrible digs with other students who all think she's rubbish and belittle her. And she's not very happy that they're basically having sex in the room that she shares with the other person. And it's driving her up the wall. So she moves into this bedsit. Some of the people in this film, she moves into a bedsit that's owned by Diana Rigg. Diana Rigg? Are you kidding? It's just got Terence Stamp and Diana Rigg in it. I cannot believe that those two people. Last film for Diana Rigg, who died last year, R.I.P. This was her last film before she passed. After, a career that began on Her Majesty's Secret Service and with, some of the most prominent 60s and 70s action spy roles, a legend. And Terence Stamp is even bigger legend. So seeing those two in this film was an amazing thing. So when she moves into this bedsit, she gets her personal space, but every night she goes to sleep, she starts having these dreams, these lucid waking dreams where she is ghosting the character played by Anna Taylor-Joy, who is arrived in London, a beautiful, sexy, confident woman who wants to be the next big singer on the London nightclub circuit. And who does, she's got all the balls in the world. She walks into the nightclubs and meets Matt Smith. Yeah, Matt Smith, who's this like wide boy, charismatic man about town. And, tries to get on stage in these supper club nightclubs where people actually dance and do all of everything that a normal nightclub does. But they're also like in Goodfellas, where they come and sit around the stage and watch performers as well as that. And it's lovely at first, and it inspires her in the fashion college to create this persona based around the Anna Taylor-Joy character, which she creates these amazing dresses and she changes her hair to look like her. And for a while I did think it was the same actress, because I was getting my reality blurred so much. I wondered what was going on. And then things go really, really wrong. Basically, she finds that the Anna Taylor-Joy character, Matt Smith, isn't such a good guy after all. He's got no intention of making her into a singer. He's got intentions of making into a prostitute. And all of the girls that come through this system of going into London and wanting to be the next big thing end up becoming pimped out. So things start going very wrong. Part of this film seems to be a descent into schizophrenia, into your reality not matching up with what's going on in the real world. So she keeps having these, like Nightmare on Elm Street, she goes from having these really wonderful dreams that empower her to seeing the nightmarish world of drugs and prostitution and broken dreams that the Anna Taylor-Joy character is going through. And it morphs into a love letter for that 1960s glamour London into a horror film. As things get worse and worse. Now, there is so much I love about this film. I think it's got great reviews, pretty great reviews, but I think it's being very, very underrated. For a start, the cinematographer here is Chung Hoon Chung, who has worked a lot with Park Chan-wook of Old Boy fame, and been one of the most prominent cinematographers in a burgeoning South Korean film industry that has won numerous awards. He's already an acclaimed cinematographer over many of Park Chan's films, but his cinematography of the rainy, glamorous nightlife of 1960s London here is an amazing standpoint. It is lyrically beautiful to look at this film, which is a big thing. It just looks incredible. And then there's the music, which is this Baby Driver was an awful sub Guy Ritchie trash film that it got pulled out for having, this soundtrack, which was a sub Tarantino soundtrack. There were like a couple of really good songs. I think the Mountain track was a really good track in there that sort of stood out. The rest of it was perfunctory. Here we run the gamut of 1960s music, which is superb. We get, stuff like Cilla Black, which I would never choose to listen to in this environment, is so evocative and emotive. And there's, probably 30 songs in the film that are all from this era. Graham Bond Organisation, who I featured on my radio show many times. Just incredible stuff. Really, Eloise, the original version of Eloise. So many incredible songs that feature in it. And there's an amazing moment where Happy House by Siouxsie and the Banshees drops. So the music and the cinematography are absolutely top tier. Really, really good. Worth watching for that alone. And the Anna Taylor-Joy and Thomasin McKenzie performances are magnificent. Thomasin McKenzie, a probable star-making turn for her. She inhibits her role with this sort of wide-eyed fear and wonder, and is a difficult character. And Anna Taylor-Joy is this like amazingly confident and then incredibly broken individual. I thought the twists were really good. I think a lot of critics said it's over-egged in the way that it handles some of them. But I really liked the twists, and I thought the twists pushed it into dangerous territory by making the film quite feminist in indefensible ways. And once you've watched it, you'll understand why. But I kind of went along with the people. I didn't expect most of it. I I didn't read up on any of it, and I didn't expect it to pan out in the way it panned out at all. I found it a continually involving and interesting machination of events. I didn't realise the way that it would pan out. It's a very unusual hybrid film. And I thought that you get Terence Stamp and Diana Rigg on top of that are really good. The one really bad character in it is, I'll see if I can find him. I can't find the name, but the guy that plays her boyfriend, thankfully, he's in about 3% of the film, but he's cringe-inducingly bad. And he was like Baby Driver driving into the film. He was so lesser quality than the two female leads in the film, or the Diana Rigg and Terence Stamp characters. And he's cringe-inducing. But happily, he doesn't really occupy much of a space in this film. It reminded me a bit of Repulsion, the Roman Polanski film, where you get this girl in a bedsit, beautiful young girl in a bedsit gradually going mad. It touched on lots of really interesting sort of cultural touchstones of swinging 60s London. And also the dark underbelly of it all as well, which was... it showed the glamorous upside and then the really horrific downside. And I thought, again, it was a really timely film in its treatment of women and the way that women were treated back then and are now. I thought those things were really interesting elements to it. I found it a very exciting film. I didn't know what was coming next. I thought it looked beautiful. I thought it sounded awesome. I thought it was pretty arty in the way that it presented these really flowing shots of nightclub London. So I'm shocked to say, from Baby Driver being my third worst film of the year, I think, when it came out, that if I don't include Nomadland, which came out 2020 and not 2021, but was the first film I ever gave 10 out of 10 to on this, Last Night in Soho may end up my film of the year. And for Edgar Wright to go from one of my worst films of the year to my best film of the year is just jaw-dropping. This is seriously well worth a watch. It's well worth not knowing anything about and just diving headlong into this really beautifully staged production, design-wise, sound-wise, cinematography and soundtrack, hybrid thriller which ends up in this sort of nightmarish horror film. It's a magnificent film. So I'm going to give... I said this year's been a lot of 8 out of 10s and not many 9s. I don't know if I've given a single film 9 out of 10 to, but I was pretty blown away by a director I'd hated for years. Edgar Wright's film, and Last Night in Soho, I'm going to give 9 out of 10.